The whole company, the demand for labor of Starbucks, not one restaurant, but Starbucks, is a function of how many coffees they want to sell. So as they build more stores, obviously they have to demand more labor. But that's the company, not the store. Okay? Remember we talked about, in the old days, a few videos ago, we talked about replication. When Starbucks builds a new store, yes, they're increasing the demand for labor, and they might have to pay workers more to get more workers to supply themselves, but they're not faced with diminishing marginal productivity because they're replicating. They make two identical stores instead of one big store. That's more efficient, right? They can duplicate what they do, and they don't have the DMP problem. They keep hiring workers, more workers, and more workers at one store. Now you have diminishing marginal utility because your capital is fixed, the restaurant is fixed, and you can't just add more people into a fixed restaurant and have it be more productive. You add another restaurant, now we can expand and be more productive. Okay, so the demand for the whole company, Starbucks, is different than the demand for labor for each restaurant. We got that? Hopefully we got that. Okay. And also, remember this VMP thing is about competitive industries. So if we're in an industry that's not competitive, we're in a monopoly or an oligopoly, what matters is not the VMP, it's the MRP, the marginal revenue product. So in most businesses, the demand for labor is the MRP, the marginal revenue times the marginal product. Okay? And there's numerical examples in your book. You don't need to worry about that. Your brain needs to think that the demand for workers is based on the revenue that that worker creates. How much money does that worker create? If you want to go ask your boss for a raise, you have a job, and you say, hey, boss, I deserve a raise. Prove to them that you're generating more revenue. Right? My first ever job, I worked at Burger King, and I was so good at my job. My job was to get there really early in the morning and set the whole place up for work, right? So every night they take the greasy, grimy broiler and they stick it in a vat of cleaning solution, and some fool has to pull it out of the cleaning solution in the morning and scrub it all down and put it together. So I used to assemble, clean off, and then assemble the broiler, clean out the shake machine, assemble the shake machine, put everything together, stock all the areas, do all that stuff. I was so good at it. I was really good at it. And the days that I worked, they could open 45 minutes to an hour sooner than the days the other dude who did it worked. So they gave me a raise, which is what they're supposed to do. I'm generating more revenue for them. The person who generates more revenue, of the two people who do the same job, the one that generates more revenue should get paid more. And they paid me more. I was very excited. It wasn't a lot of money, but I was very excited because I was getting paid more. Okay, so taxi cab. We'll be back to taxi cab in a second. It's a very important story. Why do we supply labor? Well, workers supply labor, obviously, because, they need money. And so the supply of labor is based on what the population is and what the wage is being paid, right? The higher the wage, the more people are willing to work, the more quantity supplied of labor there should be. So the labor supply, right, is based on all of this worker stuff. Now, as a worker, you have what's called a reservation wage. A reservation wage is the lowest wage that you will accept. So you may, let's say that you're working for $12 an hour somewhere and you get laid off. And the only job you can find is at $7 an hour, but you won't take that job. Well, if you won't take that job because it doesn't pay enough, that says your reservation wage is somewhere above $7. And if, in fact, 12 is the least you would take, then $12 is your reservation wage. It's the lowest wage you will accept. Okay? Got that? Now, the supply curve for labor looks funny. And we say backward bending. And you're looking at this and you say, why didn't you draw this? And then it's not worth it. You think the supply curve looks like that. But the supply curve for labor actually might look like that. So here's demand. And here's supply. And that's weird. Backward bending. So let me give you an example. The New York cab drivers. A study was done of cab drivers in New York. And the reason they did this study, the reason the cab company in New York hired an economist to come study them, was it seemed to them that on the busiest days, when there were big, huge conventions in New York and there were people on every street corner trying to hail cabs, that was the day none of the cab drivers seemed to want to work. And the cab company thought that was silly, because that's the day that it's easy money, and the longer you drive, you can just make money and money and money and money. And they figured the cab drivers should all be falling over each other trying to get out and work. But it turns out that when they talked to the cab drivers all wanted to make a certain amount of money. So a cab driver would say, look, I want to make $300 a day, and once I make $300, I'm going home. So on the days when it's hard to make money, on the days where there aren't any fares and nobody, those are the days they drive around and drive around and drive around trying to make their money. On days when it's easy to make money, they run out, they make that money really quick, and then they go home because they've made it. Now, logically, economically, an economist would say, no. You should want to average $300. And on the days that it's really easy to make money, you should make 4 or 5 or 6. And then on those tough days when it's just impossible to make any money, those are the days you go home early because you're like, I'm wasting my time out here. But that's not the way people are. They actually have a backward bending supply curve that once they start making too much money, it's like $12 an hour is the minimum I'll take, but once I get 20, then the rest is gravy, right? So if you're making 25, you don't work more, you work less because you're making more than you need or wanted or thought you were going to have. Okay? Labor market is much more complex in a lot of ways than other markets. The other thing that affects labor supply is what we call the non-pecuniary aspects of the job. Pecuniary means money. So if your job is being a garbage guy and go picking up garbage, that's a nasty job. If you want to work in a steel mill, that's a nasty job. Nasty jobs pay better generally than good jobs. The nicer the job is, generally speaking, the less everything else equal, ceteris paribus, the less it pays. Really cool, just nice, fun jobs that aren't a big deal, they don't generally pay that well. And jobs that have bad working conditions, they pay better. University professors make less money than their counterparts do in the private sector. So engineering professors make less money than engineers. Finance professors make less money than finance guys. Economists out in the real world make more money than econ professors. Okay? But the university has a lifestyle. It has non-pecuniary benefits. We don't have a boss staring over our shoulder. We don't do, unless we're grading a whole bunch of stuff, we don't have to do 70-hour weeks. And if we do, it's because we're doing something fun, right? We're writing a book or something and we enjoy it and we're having a good time. Okay? We get to hang out with college students. Yeah, that's fun. We have a lifestyle. We get the summer off if we want it. We get spring break off. We work and we get paid and we get spring break off. Okay? So there are non-pecuniary benefits to being a college professor, and because of that, college professors are going to make less than people who have the same skills out in the private sector who have less desirable working conditions. Okay? So again, This whole labor thing is very complex compared to the way we have to think about most other markets. Okay. So there are these things called unions. A union is a group of workers that band together. Group of workers who have similar interests and trying to deal with their company. So this is a picture of clothing workers in 1912 out on strike, back when we used to make clothes in the United States. Okay? So there are a number of different kinds of unions. There's craft and trade unions. Craft and trade unions are people who all have the same skills. So plumbers union, electricians union, carpenters union. Okay? Those unions are really old. They've been around a long time because that's how we used to train people. You train plumbers by having them join the union, and then you train them in the union. Okay? It was a way to train people. An industrial union is a union of everybody in the same industry. So the United Auto Workers is a union. And no matter what your skill is, you can belong to the United Auto Workers Union. The United Mine Workers is a union. So no matter what your job in the mine is, you can belong to the United Mine Workers. Right? There's the Screen Actors Guild. There's you with me? Unions that are about a specific industry. There are public employee unions, which are unions from government workers. Government worker unions don't have as many rights in general as private sector. Okay? In Nevada, we don't even technically allow full-fledged unions among public employees. And many states don't do that. They don't let their public employees unionize. Right? And then there are even further away from union things that are sort of like unions, associations, like the American Medical Association or the American Bar Association. If you want to be a lawyer, you have to get certified. There's sort of a union, right? They don't call them that, but the American Bar Association says, okay, you're allowed to practice law. Okay? Well, they'll yell at me for saying this, but that's no different than the plumbers union saying you're a certified plumber. Okay? In the United States, it is illegal for you to have to join the union before you can get a job. It used to be in the old days that some businesses you couldn't even apply for work at that business until you had joined the union and started paying them. So that's outlawed. Okay? In the United States, you can be forced to join a union after you're hired. All right? But there's a group of states, and Nevada is one of those states, that have these things called right-to-work laws. And you should check and see what Martin Luther King said about right-to-work laws, because it's not a right and has nothing to do with work. The right-to-work law says you don't have to join a union, you can't, or it actually is kind of the opposite of that, which a lot of laws that Congress passes have exactly the opposite title of what they're really for. There's a law in Nevada called the Homeowner Protection Act, and it prevented homeowners from suing the builders of their homes if their home was screwed up. So how that protected the homeowner, no one's ever been able to explain, but it sounds better to say we passed the Homeowner Protection Act than we passed the Mess Over the Homeowners Act. Okay? We got that? Now, what's the purpose of a union? Well, let's talk about this in economic terms. Collective bargaining. The point of the union is that instead of each individual having to go and bargain for their salary and benefits by themselves, all of the workers together as a group can bargain for their wages and benefits. Okay? Unions over the years have done a great job of raising wages and raising benefits and raising working conditions. In fact, very often people on the far right will say, no. The reason we have a 40-hour work week and all this is really because Henry Ford started it. Henry Ford wanted better workers, and so he paid his workers more and he gave them benefits and all. Well, it turns out that if you study that, Henry Ford hated unions. And he got his employees to basically agree not to unionize at Ford in exchange for better wages. So fear of the union or unhappiness with a potential union is what got Henry Ford to do that, right? And if we go back into the 1800s, businesses, big businesses, the robber barons hated unions so much that they committed violence against them. And there was this huge violence, so much that they even got the army sometimes. The U.S. Army actually came out to beat up strikers and to arrest them and shoot them. And there was businesses very much did not appreciate what the unions wanted, which is higher wages and better working conditions and benefits and all that. So unions largely responsible for that, right? And it's all part of the progressive era and all that stuff.